Here are your Court News Ohio top stories in 5 minutes.
A Hocking County man released from prison after spending 6 years on death row can ask for compensation from the state for wrongful imprisonment, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled on October 28th. Dale Johnston had his 2 murder convictions from 1984 overturned after he went to prison because the state failed to disclose potentially important evidence to Johnston's attorney and because a witness's testimony was improperly admitted. A trial court rejected Johnston's first wrongful imprisonment case in 1993, but in 2008, another man admitted to the murders of Johnston's stepdaughter and her fiancé. Johnston asked the Supreme Court to determine if a 2003 amendment to a state law about compensating wrongfully imprisoned individuals applied retroactively. The court unanimously decided that it does apply retroactively, and because Johnston was able to show a post-sentencing procedural error, he could file a second wrongful imprisonment claim. The decision reverses a 10th District Court of Appeals judgment on that issue. The appeals court will now consider the state's other arguments opposing Johnston's wrongful imprisonment claim.
A Springfield man had his convictions and death sentence affirmed by the Ohio Supreme Court on October 27th. Jason Dean killed a man and attempted to murder 6 other people during a 4-day shooting spree in 2005. He was indicted on aggravated murder and attempted murder charges, and a jury imposed the death penalty. On appeal in 2010, the Supreme Court determined Dean hadn't received a fair trial, and he was granted a new one. He later was again found guilty and sentenced to death. The court reviewed Dean's arguments from his second trial, and this time the court's majority determined that his death sentence was appropriate.
Judge Julia Dorian has nearly 12 years of service on the bench, with the last 4.5 years being at the 10th District Court of Appeals in Franklin County. Public service is deeply rooted on both sides of Judge Dorian's family. Just across the street from the appeals court sits Dorian Commons, a park named after her uncle Michael, a former Franklin County commissioner. Her father, Hugh, is Columbus's long-serving auditor. Her mother, Janice, comes from a family of firefighters.
I'm very proud of my family's tradition of public service, and it's really giving me a great example to follow now that I myself am in public service.
She was inspired to enroll in law school after volunteering in Santiago, Chile.
Chile was transitioning from dictatorship to democracy, and it was really a fascinating time to be there for a student of political science, as I was, and I saw firsthand the role that lawyers played both in defending and advocating for human rights in that country, but also in reestablishing their democracy and reestablishing their democratic institutions.
With her knowledge of Spanish and French, Judge Dorian has used her foreign language experience to champion the use of qualified interpreters in the courtroom.
I do a lot of work with the Supreme Court here on interpreter issues throughout the state of Ohio, and helping to develop standards to ensure that interpreters in our courts are qualified, and also to work with and teach my fellow judges on how to work with interpreters to ensure that they are qualified.
Judge Dorian serves with 7 other judges on the appeals court to hear appeals from the trial courts in Franklin County, the Ohio Court of Claims, and state agencies. Judge Dorian strives to be humble and respectful of all who appear before the 10th District Court of Appeals.
Nearly 75% of applicants, or about 780 out of 1,045 test takers who sat for the July 2015 Ohio bar examination, received passing scores. Those successful applicants, who also satisfied all of the Ohio Supreme Court's requirements for admission, will take the oath of office on November 16th during 2 special public sessions of the Ohio Supreme Court at the Ohio Theater in Columbus. The bar exam is administered twice a year by the Supreme Court, which regulates the practice of law in Ohio. The next bar exam will be administered on February 23rd through the 25th.
5 Ohio judges lost their bids to retain their seats on November 3rd, including 3 gubernatorial appointees who were seeking election for the first time. Voters in 29 counties selected the municipal court judges, where a third of the 58 judicial races were contested with 2 or more candidates. In all, 11 new judges will take the bench. Ohio judges are elected to 6-year terms. Next year, elections will be held for the Ohio Supreme Court, appeals courts, common pleas courts, and county courts. Unofficial results can be found on the Ohio Supreme Court website.
That's a look at Court News Ohio's top stories. Visit courtnewsohio.gov for the latest headlines on Ohio's courts.